Good morning, everybody. I am Tate Tateman with the Nebraska Department of Education. I serve on the federal programs team, and one of my roles is as the non-public ombudsman, and I'll be leading our office hours today. With me, I've got our great Nebraska Department of Ed federal programs team. Today, these wonderful colleagues of mine will be watching the chat and helping us out there. As you have questions, feel free to just type them into the chat. And as we go and find good places to answer those, we'll answer them. But we'll make sure at the end of the session, we make sure all questions are answered or have your name and district so we can get back with you if we're not sure at the answer at this current time. But also at the end, we'll open it up if you have questions that you can unmute and ask those questions as well. Again, like I said at the start, my name is Tate Tateman. I'm the non-public ombudsman. The other parts of my job, I work with Title 2A and 4A, and I work with ESUs 2, 9, 13, and 15. So we are all here today to talk about consultations for our non-public schools, whether it be Title I or within boundaries, which when we talk about within boundaries, and we'll get into more detail, it'll be Titles 2, 3, EL, and Immigrant, and Title 4A, and the competitive Title 4B, 21st Century Community Learning Centers. We talked about our great staff, and now we just want to give a couple heads up as a couple minor things we want to let people know that are going on. Because of some changes in data collection, right now, any school that has a resident student in their district that happens to be at Boys Town or NH Wagner and is a free and reduced student, those two schools are showing up on your Title I consultations. If you have either of those schools, you do not need to do anything at this point. You will not be consulting with those schools. We are working on seeing if we can remove those from the applications in the back. If for some reason we are unsuccessful at that, we will reach out with extremely specific instructions of what you need to do to take care of that issue. But we think we'll be able to get that taken care of internally. Another minor issue we have affects three parts of the state, and it has to do with CEP and Title I data. We are having to verify a few of our private schools a second time. So if you happen to be in one of the three areas I'm going to mention here shortly, we would like you to wait on your Title I consultations with your private schools, your non-public schools, and for at least about a week or so as we get that, because there might be some schools on that list that we will be able to remove because of a data issue that we're working with about 7 or 8 private schools to get corrected. And for your knowledge, those areas are the area around the Winnebago Reservation. So if you're in that area, please hold off on Title I. The Tecumseh, Nebraska area. So if you're around the Tecumseh area and the surrounding districts, we'd like you to hold off on your Title I, allocate your Title I non-public consultations, as well as mostly Omaha, but also if you're in Metro Omaha, we would really appreciate if you would give us a little time to make sure that the correct non-public schools are in your Title I list. We will send out reminders to people once these have been corrected, so you know who to be reaching out to for consultation. And we'll get into a lot more details with the consultation piece here shortly. The other thing when you're in the applications you'll notice is there are currently no instructions. The apps actually got completed late Friday, so we are updating those instructions to match what's in the applications. As the veterans on this call know that neither of these applications were prior in the new portal. They've both been moved from either the CDC or the legacy portal into the new portal this year, and that was finalized on Friday. So we will be working on those instructions. They hopefully will be up some point during next week. One thing we encourage you to do is Rhonda will put the information in the chat as we talk about some things going through, but we'll also post this PowerPoint and eventually the video of this recording online. And so for now, if you're trying to do these things and you need a little bit of instruction, I would use this PowerPoint as your instruction piece, and we'll let everybody know when the official instructions are out there. Generally speaking, both of these applications are very intuitive, especially for people that have done this before. So we're hoping that does not cause many issues. But even if you need to wait a week or two, don't feel bad. We have until the end of April to get this completed. So it's not something that has to be done in the next week or two. So you do have time for that. So just to kind of go over the agenda, we have this here. And I know as different people have different learning styles, if you do have your applications already in the new portal and want to follow along when we're going through the steps, this would be a good time to start getting into your portal and being able to access those apps. If you haven't gone in and requested those applications yet, you're not going to be able to get that in time. But if they're already in there and you'd like to walk through in the second and third parts, that could be really helpful if that's how you best learn. So as you see, we're doing a brief overview here. We're going to talk kind of about what consultation really is, and then talk about some tips. And then we'll get into probably the two main parts of our office hours today. The Title I consultation collection. We'll talk about who to collect with, the overview of the actual form, how to fill it out online, and then have some tips. And then we'll do the same thing with the non-public within boundaries collection, which is, like I said before, for titles 2, 3, 4, and 4B. That last one is flipped around. Sorry about that. Again, it's the same type of thing, who you're going to consult with, the overview of the form, and the tips. A lot of the applications are very similar in the two, and we'll get into that as we go through, but we'll go through each application separately. And then we just have a couple slides at the very end that talk about carryover, and if you're one of the few districts that needs to do tribal consultations, what that is, and those will be short. And then we'll have time for questions at that point. So if you haven't added the Title I consultation and within boundaries consultation, you'll need to add that in the new portal. Last week, Beth Wooster sent out to all districts that this office hours was coming up. Earlier this week, you received an email either from me on the Title I consultation, which if you receive that email, that means you do need to go in and look at who you're supposed to consult with for Title I. And our NDE services system sent out the within boundaries consultation. And throughout the next couple months through the end of April and maybe one or two in early May, we won't bombard you, but we will be sending out reminders through those emails. We can send them out as a general reminder, but we also have the option of just sending out information as reminders to the districts who haven't submitted or haven't submitted and approved. So you should not be getting any once you've completed the consultation forms and submitted them. So we try to, make sure you don't get overly bombarded with emails from the system that don't apply to you because you've completed the applications. So when we talk about consultation, when does the consultation take place? And we'll talk about a few things, and I have a really good diagram that kind of shows the whole process. But consultation with our non-public schools, whether it be for Title I or our within boundaries, it should be ongoing and a year-round process. We're kind of at the start of the process right now for the 26-27 school year. It should start in March and April. I do know some districts start preparing and working with their non-public schools in late January and February, and that's great as well. This third bullet is so important. Communication between both our publics and non-public schools should be taking place frequently. This also helps alleviate any concerns, making things sure they're done in timely fashion, but also having a good plan as we go into the 26-27 school year to provide services for students under Title I, for students under Titles 3 and 4, and for teachers under Title 2A. And as we've talked before, this time frame for the application to download the forms and to fill in the data is March 1st to April 30th. That's an annual part of everything. And then we have a 2-week period, the first part of May, where we go in, see if we see any issues or anything, or if you realize there's an issue and need to update that, your forms or something you put in your forms, we have that 2-week period. After May 15th, that's our hard closure date. We really need everything completed by May 15th, because after May 15th, if it's not completed, there's going to be extra steps you will have to take to do late data updates. So we just like to put that out there. There is a hard date. As an agency, we're really going to start enforcing these dates a lot more often just because of some data issues we've had. So you'll be getting reminders if you haven't completed this. And a lot of times, I know sometimes it's just you've had to move that meeting. Just let me know that, but really hit for that April 30th date, and at the very last, the May 15th date. We have the process on our website, and Rhonda will put our federal programs website in the chat. She'll also be putting a link to our non-public page as well. So those are 2 pages that you can get to. They're tied to each other. You can get back and forth between them through the column on the left with the links. But those just have general information. And we are finalizing all the changes for the non-public page this week and next. So if something has a date from 2025, that will be being updated to 2026. But a couple forms I'll talk about, the checklist, those will get updated dates, but there will be nothing that changes. So if you look at those checklists later, those are current and updated, just don't have an updated date yet. So why are you here, and why do we have to do consultation for our non-public schools? Well, our ESSA funds are all federal funds, and they go for all students, whether they're attending public or non-public schools. And those students have generated the funding through either student population counts through the census or poverty counts through the census. So the students in our non-publics are generating funds that do come to the public schools, and that's why the students and the teachers receive services in those non-public from the public schools. And that's called equitable services. So we are providing equitable services to the teachers and the students. And one thing I like to point out is I'm talking about the teachers and the students. The non-public schools themselves do not get services. It's the students and the teachers at those that will get the services through ESSA programs. That's important because of this third bullet. The funds are funds that are allocated to the LEA. So it goes to the public schools, and we pay for and take care of the services and make sure those teachers and students are getting those services. It's also the responsibility of the LEA or school district to reach out and make that initial contact. We do not wait for the private school to contact us. We reach out to that non-public school to start the consultation process. So when we're doing this, what are some other requirements? I mentioned before the timely and meaningful consultation. And there's actually a place on the forms where the non-publics have to sign off that they believe timely and meaningful consultation has taken place. So this has to happen before the design of the program that will serve the non-public schools and teachers, and the development and implementation of any of the programs that are covered under ESSA. And this last one, you'll see there's a couple bold things marked because it's really important. The consultation has to occur before the school district makes any decision that could affect the opportunity of eligible private school students, and must continue this throughout the whole implementation and evaluation of the services being provided. One of the main things we're talking about here is transferability. We have a large amount of districts that transfer their Title 4A funds to either Title II or Title I, or their Title IIA funds to Title IV and Title I. If you're one of those districts that transfer, You have to explain this to the private school, make sure they're understanding how this is going to affect them, because districts are required to transfer 100%. You cannot transfer just the public share. You have to transfer 100%. So that will have an effect on the non-public school. You need to listen to what the non-public school has to say, how it might affect them, what their thoughts are on it. And then the LEA makes the final decision. And that's important. It is the final decision of the LEA. So even if the non-public does not want the LEA to transfer, the LEA still may transfer. You just have to make sure the non-publics are aware of that. And, we also make sure through the consultation forms and through the application that has happened. So our non-publics are not surprised when they don't receive certain services that funds were generated for. I really like this graphic, and as you can tell by the bottom left, this is provided by the United States Department of Education. This is how they see what the consultation should look like. And as you can tell by the middle, it's going on throughout the year. We should be working with our private schools to update. Are the services we're providing working? Are they going as planned? Do adjustments need to be made? Have we scheduled the necessary professional development, registered the teachers for the necessary professional development that we're planning on using some of our ESSA funds for? And it just has, 9 categories that should be talked about. Now, some of these in some cases aren't going to be of great importance because of how the services are provided, but we have to meet the needs of the students and the teachers. It's not the public school deciding what we're going to provide. It's meeting the needs of those non-public school students and teachers. How much funding? Of course, at this time of year, when we're talking about the funding, they are estimates, and we need to let people know, and that we'll have final amounts in typically July and August that are official. We do have preliminary before them, and that's why that ongoing consultation is so important. We also need to make sure we're evaluating the program in the non-public schools, similar to how we evaluate our programs in the public schools. And this is just a good slide I like to remind people that we have just when you come back and need more information to make sure you're doing everything you need to be doing. Just some general tips, probably the biggest one is this first one. A positive, good professional relationship is always helpful. As nothing in life always goes perfect, when things kind of get a little bumpy, if we have those good professional developments and relationships with people, it's easier to get through with the issues. If we plan ahead, we shouldn't be waiting till April, May, and June to get these funds spent and how we're going to spend them. There should be a plan, and if need be throughout the year, make those adjustments so we are completing our services as we come to the end of the school year. Late April, early May for student services, maybe on into June for professional development services for teachers. And if we have those plans, we seem to have less issues going forward. We have less issues having to deal with carryover and how that affects funds for the next year. This third bullet, talks about these are the federal government's programs. They're made to help students. And that's one of the keys. It's about the students. No matter where they attend, whether it's a public or non-public, these funds are generated by all our students, and we need to be serving all these students. And no matter where they go to school, or even if they're homeschooled, all the students we have and what we serve in Nebraska will be out in the population, and we want all our kids to be successful in whatever they're doing to support us in our communities. And then the last tip on here is, document those communications. Keep an agenda. If you have meetings in person, same thing. If you have Zoom meetings, keep notes just so you can track it. Because probably there's not one person whose only job is just this non-public consultation. And since we all have multiple jobs, we really want to make sure we document everything. So if something does go wrong, we can go back to those notes and figure out what was the plan and what needs to be adjusted in that plan. Okay, I'll take a quick pause there because the next 2 sections, we're going to actually get into the actual physical, what you need to do with the Title I consultation collection first. And there's going to be two main pieces to both this collection and the within boundaries. It's first getting into the system, which is in the new portal. There's two different applications, one for the Title I, which we're going to talk about now. You need to be able to get in that system, and that will help show you who you need to consult with. And once you get in there, you're going to find any non-public school for Title I that has reported a resident student of your district. So you may not have a non-public school within your boundaries. So so don't be surprised if you're like, we don't have a non-public school. Why am I getting this Title I? Because Title I follows the student. So if a student lives in your district residential boundaries, you might be serving them at a private school outside of your boundaries, or in a lot of cases, we'll talk about this, you might be working with another district to provide those services. So as we go through here, we talk about, we don't recognize homeschools as this part. We're just our recognized non-public schools, and that's why you won't see any in there. These schools I mentioned may or may not be there. This list will vary from year to year because a lot of times, our students move, a private school may open, they may have students for various reasons. So it's really important to check this. But even if you check it, if you've had a school you've served before in Title I and they're not on your list, unless you know the reason they're not on, we still encourage you to reach out and just double check that. It's probably going to be fine, but it's better safe to be sorry. And that's
Tate,
kind
I'm
of what
gonna
that
Tate, yeah,
last.
Tate, I want to interrupt for just a minute because this matches a question that I got in the chat privately from a school district superintendent who said that they don't have a school on their list this year. Non-public is not listed, and they find it very unlikely that there would not be any free and reduced lunch kids from that district because they take about 65 of their kids to that non-public. So, what advice would you give them for what to do to assure that they should or shouldn't consult with that non-public?
Okay, that's a really good question. What should happen probably at that point? Because it sounds like you're on top of things, you're like, something's going on here. My first step would be call that non-public school and just verify, because I do know we have a few that are closing, probably not likely in this case, or you'd already know about it because it seems like you're really well aware. But if they're not, see. And if you can really confirm that this seems like it's an issue, send an email to myself and our help desk. If you don't happen to have the help desk email, that's fine. Just send it to me. That way we can look into it, because where this comes from is what the non-publics report to us in what's called a non-public membership report. And we pull the data from there, and I have access to check those. And so that's another thing too. When you reach out to me, I can see if that's maybe an issue on our end where something for some reason didn't get uploaded correctly, or if the non-public school didn't upload. So that's one of the main reasons we have a couple of these items are here, is for people that do run into this, because typically you're not going to see a decline, especially when you're talking about that amount of kids. The only other thing I could see is maybe they've decided they don't want services, but I would think they would have reached out to you before filling out the paperwork. So go ahead, reach out to them. And then if they do need services and it's not showing up, I can work with you and the non-public school and our team, and we can get things straightened out to make this happen. So we're going to go into the overall process. And a lot of these, I'll talk about some things and I'll show you how it's done with some screenshots in the system. So the first thing you have to do is you have to go in, like we've talked about, you'll find your schools and you'll need to download the consultation forms. And so you can download one at a time, or you can also, if you have multiple schools, there is a button to download all your forms at one point. Once you have those forms and know which non-public schools you need to reach out to, you need to contact those non-public representatives. So you hopefully you know who they are, but if not, you just need to reach out to the private schools. Their contact information is on these sheets, the name of the school, address, phone number, all that shows up on the form. So once you've gone through the consultation itself, then you'll come back with those forms you've had filled out and you will enter the data into the form. And once you've got all that information entered, and we'll show you that here shortly, you will submit and approve by that due date. So with that, that would be April 30th, ideally. Push comes to shove, May 15th at the drop dead date. And then with those paper copies, you do need to keep those on file for 6 years because one of the requirements of the federal government is signed consultation forms. That's going to be your evidence that you have signed consultation forms. So that could come up during a monitoring where we're double checking to make sure you have those, or also if the state auditors are looking into things like that, those could be pulled. And that's why it's really important to keep those on file for 6 years. So when you go in, this is what you'll see on your first screen. On the top left, you'll have whoever the user is, you'll have your school district name, and right now you'll be looking at the 25-26 school year because that's the school year we're in, and we're collecting data that will be used for next school year. So right now you'll be looking at 2025 and 2026 school year. One of the things I do like to point out in that drop down, if you need to check something from past years, you can click that drop down and it will give you those previous years. So you can look at prior information if you'd like. And then there's some other things you can do on the left. The request button is just going to show you this screen. I'll also let you know this is a screenshot from my application. So I have got a couple extra buttons on the left that you won't see, but you'll have the instructions, you'll have reports, you'll have the contact us, which will have Beth, Dottie, or not Beth and my emails along with the help desk, and then your log out button. When you first go in, where it says download form, that's going to be the key you're going to be looking at. So this district has 4 non-public schools listed in their Title I that they'll need to be having consultation with. So you'll click either each individually download form to print out that form, or you can go to the button down below that says green that says download all forms. You click on that, all 4 will be downloaded in PDF for you to your desktop. So that's what you'll have. You'll know who to schedule with. You'll schedule your consultations, go through everything, be making the decisions, and then you'll come back and you'll eventually enter the data. But we're going to talk about a couple other things first on these next couple screenshots. So what you'll see on the bottom of that, this is just the bottom of that first page. It's grayed out now because I had not entered any data when I did this screenshot. And until data is entered, you won't be able to submit or approve. The system is built that any consultation form you have in there has to be completed before those buttons become live. And we'll get into a little more detail later on this. So we've had our consultation. We've got our forms filled out and signed from the consultation. Now we need to take that, get back into the system, and we're going to talk about entering that data. So to enter that data, we're going to go back to that original screen, and I'm going to talk about the steps like I did on the first part to download the forms, and then show you some screenshots. What you'll notice on the printed form is it looks very similar to ones in the past if you've done this in the past. The forms really didn't change. We just have a little minor one that started last year, and we'll talk more about it today. But there'll be various different sections. The first section is section 1. There's 2 questions on here. The first one says, check this box if only if the non-public school does not wish to participate. So if you reach out to them and they say, we don't want to participate, you get them to sign off on that, you mark the form, you'll mark that, and you'll notice it'll say skip to section 4. Well, the good thing is if you mark this, the system will take you to section 4. And then we have a second one, 1.1b, check this box only if non-public system does not have eligible Title I Part A students attending. So if they ended up not having any students that generated funds and or no students that live in your district that need extra Title I services, you would mark this box. And again, it'd be the same thing. You're not going to have to fill out sections 2 and 3. But one of the things I really like to point out here is this piece and then the next piece. If during consultation you don't have those students, there's also a comment box. We need you to kind of make a comment to kind of say why you're marking this box, just for us to have that documentation. Also, this box is really good. We have, like I mentioned before, a couple of our private schools that are closing. If they did their non-public membership report in the fall, they have students that are going to create a Title I consultation for you. Since they are currently open, you still need to consult with them. But if they're closing, you could mark one of these 2 boxes and in the comments part, or put during consultation, we learned that this non-public school is closing. Because if they're closing, you're not going to be providing service to them. So you'd put that, and this will make more sense when we get to the screenshots here. So you have those first 2 I talked about in this comment box. So this is going to be for buildings that aren't served. And this red comment at the back under the comment box is very important because most districts that are doing this consultation form will not be marking either of those boxes. And it says if neither situation applies, click on save and then click on next. So basically, if you have participating schools, you'll come over here, you'll click on the green save button, and then you'll go to the next slide. That next slide will take us to section 2. On section 2, we'll have a few questions. And the first one talks about, was the non-public district consulted during all phases of the design and development of the school district Part A program, Title I Part A program? Check this next box if the system was consulted before the public school made any decisions or changes that could be affecting them. And check this box if the system will participate in the Title I Program A. So just as a helpful hint, if you have a building participating, these all 3 are requirements. So all 3 of these boxes will need to be checked. And as we continue on, and this is where some of this is going to look a little different than previously. If there are services being provided, you need to let us know where those Title I services are being provided. The 3 I have here in a public school facility, in a non-public school facility, or a neutral site are usually one of the 3. There's a couple other options, but these are the 3 you're typically going to select. So if the non-public kids are coming to the public school, you'd select public school facility. If the teacher and staff are going to the non-public school, you'd select that. If there is a neutral site, we don't see that very often, but it does happen, you'd mark that. And that will be all in a drop-down box, and you'll select one of those. Most, it's typically in a non-public school facility is what we see marked. Then the next question talks about contracting with another public district, especially if you're new or don't have a lot of our small districts are in our metro areas, some of the outlying districts. You may only have 1 or 2 kids generate funds, but there's other districts whose kids may generate funds in a school, in that non-public school as well. So it might be a point where the different districts work together, say, this non-public school has kids from 3 different districts. 2 of the districts may send their funds to the one public school. So that one public school provides all the services for all three districts. And we see things like that. So if you have the funds, but you're contracting with another district, you would part yes. Again, this happens not a lot. So we'll see no typically, but there are places where people will answer yes because they're contracting. When you mark yes, you'll get a drop-down box. You will select from that drop-down box the district that is providing the services for your district. And so here is a screenshot of that page. So you'll see the top three boxes all have to be check marked. Those are all requirements. So if you're providing services, those have to be marked. The location of services is required, and that's the drop-down box. The next question is, are you contracting? That's required. If you put yes, the rest of the information below will show up. If you mark no on that, these last two pieces won't be on there. And so if you do mark yes, then another public school, this is the drop-down box, you'll choose that school. But in the past, we've required leases up until last year. A lease is not a requirement. If the non-public school does want to charge you funds, if you're coming in to the building to provide services, you may set up a lease and you may have to pay. Typically, it was $1 in the past. And this is just what this note's about. If you are being charged by the non-public school to use their facility, those funds must come out of the Title I-A non-public share. This is rare. We don't see this happen very often, but we just like to call it out because up until last year, we required the lease agreement. We still had some people doing the lease agreement last year, but it's no longer required. So once you complete this page, you click the green Save button and go to Next. And then that Next will take you to the next section. And you'll have a little more information to update. The first was, for the following school year, there's data that will go in. There should be a pre-populated number in both 3.1 and 3.2. I know as we've been doing some checks, that number is not appearing currently, or at least as of yesterday, it was not appearing. Our IT thinks they'll have that completed. So if you happen to have already printed it and don't want to print another, you can just go in and write that number in there. Once those numbers are in there, that will be grayed out and you cannot change that number because that is what the non-public school reported, and that's how all determinations for services will be made by those numbers. So if it's not there when you go in, it will be shortly. And as a reminder for the low income, this is the number of low income students, not the number of students receiving Title I services. And that's a really good reminder because we have kids who are low income that generate the funding. But if you have other kids that aren't low income from your district that are attending that school, those other kids may need the services. So it is possible to provide services to a non-low income student who needs the services, but not provide the low income student services because they don't need them. We are providing services to those in need. And that can be really confusing. The low income generates the funding, but we would be allowed and should be providing Title I services to any student that's a resident of our own district attending a non-public school. The key always comes down to funding. If there's not enough funding, then choices have to be made on how much services are going to be provided. A lot of our districts don't receive a lot of funding for the non-publics, so it could be as little as after-school tutoring. And we might have to decide if we only have funds that can maybe fund 3 students, we fund the 3 most needy that are resident. And so this is what that page will look like. And again, as you see, my screenshot is not pre-populated. Those will be pre-populated very soon. So you go into this, you look in there, and this is one of those through consultation, you might get a question. These numbers aren't anything close to what the non-public school is. That's when you would reach out to the help desk or myself and we could look into it. You'll look at that, you'll press save, and then next. So once these numbers are populated, all you have to do on this page is press the save and next and go on to the next slide. And then this is the last place you're actually entering data from the consultation form. So you'll still have that school name at the top. You'll have to click that checkbox because part of the agreement and consultation is the non-public school has to sign off that they agree with the equitable and effective programs that are being implemented based on this Title I consultation. So whoever from the public school was involved, you'll put their name, title, the date that they signed. You'll put in their email. Please be really careful when you type in email addresses, because if you have something at something dot something, our system will accept it as legitimate. Those are the only type of business rules you can take. So we can't double check that, but we use this sometimes to reach out to both the public and private schools. And then the phone number. And then the bottom part's the same thing for the non-public representative that signed off on the consultation form. You'll put in all the information regarding them. You'll hit save and close. And when it closes, it just goes back to your first page again, where you started with the inner data. So that takes us to the last step, which is submit and approve. So some districts, it's the same person who can submit and approve. In many districts, it's two different people. You have one person entering the data and they can submit it, and then one other person who has to go in and approve. These are not completed until both steps have happened. And as we get toward the end of March and into April, we can look and see, is there a district that has just submitted and not approved? We can let you know that. Or are you a district that hasn't submitted or approved? And we can let you know that. So the key is only the person's designed as an approver, which is typically a district administrator, can do that. Don't pay attention to the CDC. We didn't get that taken out of there. That really should be portal on here. And so once it's been submitted and then approved, this is a key bullet. Once it's approved, you are no longer able to make changes as a district. If you find you need to make changes, you would have to reach out to our NDE help desk, and they would either work with you and reopen your forms, which that would be most likely before May 15th, or if it's after May 15th, you'll have to go in and do a late data change or request, and then our help desk would work with you to submit that. So that's why we really encourage people, try to have these done and in by April 30th and double check stuff so we can get any fixes by May 15th, because it becomes much more difficult to complete after the 15th. So this last slide here is just what you'll see when you're ready to submit and approve. And this is back on that first page. You'll mark that checkbox. The submit will light up. Once you've submitted, it will go to the person that has to approve. The approve button will become alive. And what we see on the right is the date it was approved and submitted and approved, and the user. So if there's questions later on, we know who to contact with that. And these next couple slides are something that's available on our website. We have direct links for the checklist, and they're also available on our website. These are just things that you should be talking about. I've mentioned a lot of them through. So when you think about this, a lot of districts I know pull these documents down to make sure they can check all these off when they're talking with their non-public schools. On my slides, I've got 2 slides for Title I. So there's a handful of items. A lot of them go together, and you just need to make sure you get through all of those items and your non-publics are aware. This is also something I always like to point out. If you're reading through this and there's something on here you just don't get or understand, that's when you can reach out to me. That's one of my jobs, is to help you understand something with consultation. If you need assistance with consultation, reaching out to me and I can help you out with that information. So we have gotten through the Title I, and now we're going to do within boundaries. A lot of what you'll see is very similar to Title I. There's just different things we have to collect. So some of the slides will be a little different. And this will include multiple programs. It'll have Title IIA, Title III Immigrant, Title III English Learners, Title IVA, and then also our one competitive grant that's in here is Title IVB, the 21st Century Community Learning Center. And we work with our team that oversees that. And so you only have one place where you have to fill all these out. And then I pull that information for that team as well. This first bullet's the big difference here for within boundaries. You should only have a non-public within boundaries consultation form if you have a physical non-public building in your district. And so this is a big difference. So if you don't have a non-public school in your district, you will not be seeing a form there. It's only if they're located in. And again, like we talked about in Title I, if you have one that's been there before and is not, you need to reach out to them and double check to make sure that they're still open, they want or don't want services, and different things like that. And that fourth bullet, this is pretty consistent. We don't see this one change near as much, but it is important to pay attention. I'd say 1 to 3 is what I typically hear. And a lot of times what would happen is either a school closes, or maybe if you have a new one, a school opens. And then lastly, if a school possibly moves addresses. We have had that where they physically moved to a different address, which happens to be in a different district. And again, in that event, reach out to the help desk and myself. So when you go in, you'll have a main menu, very similar to what we had for Title I. Talk about your district, the school year with a drop down, and then different options we have. At the start, your main thing is going to be that non-public consults, because that's where you'll download your forms and enter your forms from. And so this is kind of what it would look like in an overview process. What you'll see here is there's nothing up here. So this district does not have a private school. So you wouldn't have that district. If you go in, you don't have to, you're going to be great. You don't have to do anything, and you won't be able to do this assurances. But we just like to kind of show that assurances is going to look very similar. So you'll have this page, and we'll show you an example here shortly of one that does. But it's the same process. You're going to download the consultation form or forms for your non-public schools. You're going to reach out to them. I know most districts that have Title I and the other title programs, they do all this at the same time. There's just 2 different forms to complete. You don't have to have completely separate consultations for the Title I and the within boundaries. You do have to do different forms and enter the data in different places. So once you have that completed after the consultation, you're going to come back. You're going to put the information in the system. We have the same dates as we've talked about with Title I, the April 30th and the May 15th dates. So the top part of this slide shows typically what it will say when you don't have a district. It says the district does not have a non-public system located. If you didn't get an email from me for this, you won't have one in here. But a lot of districts check, especially if you've had them in the past, and for some reason you didn't get an email or not seen it. The lower part of the slide is an example of where a district does have non-public schools in their boundaries. So in this example, this district has 2 private schools. And so you'll see again, we have the enter data and the download form. So again, you'll start with the download form, have the consultation, come back, and then enter the data. And just the same as Title I, you'll have a button that says download all forms. So if you have multiple non-publics, a lot of people like to use that download all forms, and then they can download them all at the same time rather than doing each individually. So the next couple slides are going to show what the printed out form looks like. So this is the top section. It's going to have all the non-public information. So it'll have the school will be in the goldenrod colored section. It'll have the address with the building number, and then the town. Because a lot of times the district might have other towns within their boundaries. So that's why it's also important to check that. And then this should come forward from the non-public membership report, the number of students they have. When we go to the second part of the consultation that you'll be filling out, this has not changed. This is the same as it was last year. We have the different programs on the left, for language, free, and on the later slide, we'll have the 4B on there as well. And then you have each of the columns to fill out. And this slide and the next couple tell what each of those means. So in B, public district receives allocation. Well, if you didn't receive an allocation, you wouldn't be getting this. So those will both be yes. But then you'll notice the next ones have to have marked yes or no for the school. Was the non-public school consulted? Wow, it's interesting. No is not an option here because this is a requirement. You have to mark yes for all 4 of those programs. Non-school, public school participating, this is where that yes, no is important because you might have that consultation and they've said they're not participating. That's where I really say this comment section comes in really importantly. You need to put a comment in there, not just for NDE to know, but for you to have those notes. So you can say if somebody comes back and says, they said no, but why'd they say no? Or they're saying they wanted these services, but you said no. If you have these comments, that's going to be very helpful in documentation. So you'll see yes and no in there. We will see a lot of no's for English language acquisition and immigrant education because we do have a lot of non-public schools that don't have students that qualify. However, we do have quite a few that do have them. So you'll need to mark yes. The key on these is if you mark yes, you're going to have to enter the number of students. And we'll show you what that looks like when you're going to be entering the form online. But if you enter yes, you're going to have to say how many ELs, and then the same thing, yes to immigrant, how many immigrants. And the bottom of this slide and the next couple slides just kind of explain each section. So again, I've talked about column C, D, and E just then. And then column F. And we also have what the definition is of an immigrant student because we get that quite a bit. ELs, they have qualifications. This is what qualifies for an immigrant. And we just always also like to point out the definition of state is not just the 50 states. That would include DC and Puerto Rico, as well as any other territories that are part of the United States. So the questions you have to answer are pretty brief when you enter these forms, to the point that I'm able to put all 4 sections on one slide. So for each one, district receives allocation. That's previously going to be marked yes for you. Then you have to answer those 2 questions for each program that were on the previous page on your consultation form. Non-public systems consulted, non-public systems participating. And then again on the part 3, part A, English language and immigrant education, if you mark yes, you're going to have the extra questions of the numbers of students in each. So this flows right along in the same order that their printed out form has. to make it as easy as possible. And then the Title 4B section, it's a little different screenshot, but it's the same information. Does the district receive a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant? Yes or no? If no, you don't have to participate. If yes, you do have to consult. And so you'll mark, was the non-public system consulted, and are they participating? And any comments that need to be. This is a place where we do see more public schools that have this and non-publics that choose not to participate. This is also a competitive grant. So a lot of this should have already happened as the school district has been writing the grant and applying for the grant. The non-public school should have already been involved at that point. So you'll fill that out, and I've got the screenshot of what that looks like. Actually, there's not a screenshot of that, but it's similar to what we showed before. And then on this page, you'll have entered all your information. You'll have to put the date of the consultation. And again, like we had on Title I, they have to sign off, the non-public school has to sign off that they agree with the equitable and effective programs that will be implemented based on this. Once you do that, you'll have to provide the same information that we did on Title I. It looked just a little different how it's set up, but it's the exact same information. You'll have the public schools information, and then on the next section, you'll have the non-public school, same information. And then that will take you back to your first screen. This is showing that this district had one non-public school. They've completed this form. It's the only one, so that's a good thing. This view summary report, which will be on the left, if you click that, it prints out all your forms that are completed. So let's say you had 5 non-public districts. You could click view summary report and it will show you all of them together. They're completed. And then you're getting ready for your final steps. Before submitting the form, make sure you've read the assurances and indicated in the checkbox with that. And then you'll get, again, back to that first page, you'll have the submit and approve, and it's the exact same steps. Some districts, the submit and approve will be the same person. Some will be it's the person entering the data will have submit access, and the superintendent or district person will have approve access. And this works just the same as what we talked about prior with Title I. Again, we have collection tips for all these. These are just screenshots. These are available on our website under within boundaries, non-public consultation. You'll see here, I have on the left just all the programs in general. On the right, we have for English language and immigrant education. This page, we show our Title IIA program for supporting effective instruction, our Title 4B, our community learning centers, and actually we have Title 4B twice. So we'll get that corrected, but we have these checklists online and you'll be able to pull these down from the website if you want to, or just look at them on the website. Okay, we are coming to the end of our content. We just have 2 quick other things we need to talk about. Carryover is always a not so fun thing to work with our non-public schools. One of our goals with our non-public schools should be to be able to work with them and provide all their services for Title I and the within boundaries programs within the school year, or possibly for PD after the summer. Because in the ideal world, we are spending all of the non-public funds so we don't have to deal with carryover. For our smaller districts, that's a lot easier in most cases to do. In some cases, it's just not possible. We're going to have that. But when you fill out your grants in the fall, you're going to have to know why there was carryover. And we have 3 options, A, B, and C. And if there was no real reason, they just didn't work with you and didn't get you the information, you're going to be marking reason C. But that's why that timely and meaningful and ongoing is so important, because we don't want that to happen. We want their funds to be spent for their services. So we just have a couple examples of how those funds occur in carryover. Title 2 and 4 is by a student population, complete student population per pupil. And Title 3 is a little different. It is per pupil, but only based on per pupil by those who for those that are identified as English learner or immigrant students. So if the public school has 48 ELs and the non-public have 2 ELs, we have a total of 50. It'd be 96% and 4%. And then for reason A or B, if there is an extenuating circumstance, something has happened, something happened at the district and they just didn't get things taken care of. Maybe the teacher became ill and we couldn't get a replacement for that teacher at the end of the year, or there was a PD scheduled and the presenter had to cancel the last minute. Those are extenuating circumstances. In those cases, you would select A or B, depending on the situation, and the non-public would get the full amount of remaining funds for services in the carryover. Those are all things we can work with you in the fall in the GMS system when we're doing that. The last one, and this is just a few districts that this comes into place with tribal consultation. We have a handful of districts, typically about 4 or 5 most years. And these are the reasons you might have to do tribal consultation. And our team will directly reach out to you in email to let you know if you have to do this tribal consultation. But we've got the reasons why this would come up. And this is based on 25-26 data that's submitted for the 26-27 school year. So if you have a American Indian Alaska Native population of 40% or above this current school year, you'll be doing this type of consultation. Or if you're Title VI Indian Education Grant, which is a grant straight from the U.S. Department of Ed, that does not come through NDE, it comes from the U.S. Ed, of 50,000 or more, this is a requirement. And like I said, that's a handful of districts. Those emails will come directly from our team. We have this slide with all our contact information of all the great people on our team that you can reach out to online. We also have our phone numbers if you'd like to talk with us. All of us are more than happy to help you out. When it comes to specific questions about working with the non-public schools, I'm probably your best option, and Dottie and Beth as the backups, but anybody can help you. And if something they can't help you with, they'll get that information to the people that can help you. I know there's been a lot of questions in the chat, and I think our team's been answering a lot. And I will also open it up to them to ask me those questions if it's going to be helpful for me to answer. At this point, don't feel like you have to do this right away. So if I was sitting in your seat, I would probably be sitting and not doing anything for a week or two, because I'll be sending out more emails to everybody. So unless you already have things scheduled with the non-public and want to go through with them, give us, I would say, 2 weeks. Go ahead and plan when your meetings are, but make them late March or early April or sometime in April, because you do have the whole month of April as well in that 2-week period. And push comes to shove, we don't want to do this, but if this becomes a bigger issue or is bigger than we think, we would look at extending that time. We absolutely don't want to, but we don't want you to be wasting time. So I really encourage you, if you don't have stuff scheduled, give it a week or two, because we have 8.5 weeks before that April 30th. And that's also one of the reasons we like to have this earlier. So there is plenty of time as you start looking at downloading forms and different things. If you have questions, you can reach out. And like I said before, it was finalized late Friday, and we've done a lot of checking. And sometimes it's not until actual people can go in and do it. So we know of some things we're working on already that should have just been in the background, but patience, give us grace, and we'll be able to give you grace as well too, because we know based on the comments in the chat, there are some things that have come up that we thought had been taken care of.